Product reports up through a separate leader, and I think that's actually good. I think it's healthy for those two teams to kind of have a separation in the organization. I do think that there's a give and take always with product and engineering. Like, you can't just say, well, we're not product, we don't know what to build, we're not going to do anything until you give us PRD. Because then product is going to be like, well, we don't know what's possible, we don't know what the constraints are. So they can't really give an effective product strategy without some input from engineering. So I think it's always important for product leadership and engineering leadership to be talking all the time. So that's going to constantly be evolving. And I think if you don't have that give and take, if you feel like one is more important than the other, I think it makes it very difficult to balance and really serve the needs of the organization the best that you can.
Welcome to Software Leaders Uncensored, where tech leaders drop the filters and just tell it like it is. I'm your host, Steve Taplin, serial technology entrepreneur, Amazon bestselling author of the book Fail Hard, Win Big, and CEO of Sonatafy Technology, a software delivery partner. Today, I am joined by Todd Persen, who is the CTO of a company called Hydrolix. Todd has been a proven builder of large-scale data and observability platforms. We're going to have some fun today. Todd, welcome.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
You bet. So, Todd, tell us a little bit about Hydrolix.
Yeah, for sure. Not to get too much into pitch mode, but Hydrolix is a platform for real-time data at global scale. So we focus a lot on log management in a lot of those use cases that are adjacent to observability, but where the data volumes are massive. A lot of like CDN use cases, edge use cases. So a lot of our customers and partners in this space are dealing with those kinds of challenges.
Well, and you're being modest. I mean, you guys have raised over $145 million to date and have huge momentum in this large enterprise data space. Now, you've been at the company for just over a year, right?
That's right. Yep. Just last January.
So how did you find this position? What led you to become the CTO of Hydrolix?
Yeah, it's like you said, I've been in this space for a long time. My first company, kind of in the observability space, Influx Data. We built a time series database called InfluxDB. We were there probably a little bit before the term observability really was common. And so we did a lot of early metrics, kind of were there around the same time that Datadog was getting started, and a lot of these other kind of modern observability products were being built. And so I spent a lot of time kind of looking at how customers and companies were trying to handle large amounts of time series data. And so InfluxDB was an open source project, so we got to build kind of open source momentum and go through the whole open core, like how do you monetize an open source project journey, which was interesting. And so on the back of that, I started another company called Era, which sold to ServiceNow in 2022. And that company was focused a lot more on logs, really similar to the space that Hydrolix is in. And so we saw a lot of places where,
and
this is not a surprise.
You were the CEO and co-founder of that company, right?
That's right.
And you exited to ServiceNow. That's huge. Congrats on that.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, no, it was a fun journey. I mean, ServiceNow is a really fascinating company that I think they're huge, but a lot of people don't. If you haven't worked at a big company, you may not be familiar with ServiceNow. So the Era we saw, like everyone was seeing, like huge volume growth in logs and data produced by applications and infrastructure. And so kind of going back to the well on the whole, building technology for observability use cases with that. And then kind of once I made the decision to leave ServiceNow, was already familiar with Hydrolix. Like they were kind of in the same space as we were, and got in touch with Marty and joined the team, kind of bringing that experience and expertise from my previous ventures.
And Marty Kagan, one of the founders, how did you know him? Or did you just reach out cold?
Yeah, no. I mean, when you're in the same space, you kind of get to know all the other founders of companies. So we kind of had built a relationship. Just we weren't going after the same kind of end user. They were focused a lot more on CDN and edge use cases. We had built a business with Era, kind of going after Elasticsearch replacements. Most of our customers were trying to do some sort of platform shift away from Elasticsearch. And we got to know each other, not super well, but I kind of had always had that interest in what Hydrolix was doing and built that relationship. But once I kind of made the decision to leave ServiceNow, it's a pretty easy conversation.
Well, you've certainly, anybody who founded and sold their company to ServiceNow, I think you have the credibility in your specific space. Now, Hydrolix, correct me if I'm wrong, it started in 2018. As I mentioned earlier, it's gotten huge traction, over 145 million of funding. What made you want to join the company at the growth stage they're at?
Yeah, I mean, you're right. Yeah, has been a lot of traction over the last few years. Yeah, I think the company originally started 2017, 2018. And I think with both of my previous companies, I had really been there for the earlier stages of the journey, kind of going from doing a little bit more of the 0 to 1. And Hydraulics is kind of way past that. It was an interesting time to kind of take a space that I was really familiar with, technology that I understood really, really well, having been kind of around similar tools in the past, and just being able to help Hydraulics execute kind of in that, rapid growth phase. So it was really interesting kind of mix of cool people, cool technology, really fun phase of growth, and kind of let me get some experience that I hadn't really quite had before.
Cool. So you've been there over a year. When you stepped in, what was like the biggest technical surprise that you had to deal with that maybe you didn't expect?
Yeah, I think the biggest technical surprise is actually that the technology and platform were actually really good. being at database startups for a long time, there's always somebody's got skeletons in the closet somewhere. And I think in a lot of ways, the kind of vision with Hydraulics was, leveraging object storage, which people think of as sort of low cost, low performance, leveraging object storage to actually get low cost, high performance through a lot of cool engineering design strategies. And so seeing that worked quite well. It was actually working well at scale. We've talked about this publicly, but we handled all of the CDN logs for the Super Bowl last year
Wow.
through Fox. And we were doing something like a petabyte and a half a day was like the rate that we were getting logs at. So it was a terabyte a minute or something like that of logs. And seeing that the technology was already doing that when I joined, there wasn't a lot that needed to be like, not a lot of fires to put out, but there were a lot of things in terms of how we wanted to continue working with customers efficiently. Obviously, margins are always important as you're growing, finding new markets to go after, kind of building a relationship internally with product owners and figuring out how we help them achieve what they want to go build out in the market.
Cool. So you have it easy, only work a couple hours a day, no major fires. If only the world was like that, huh?
Yep, if only.
What are some current projects you guys are working on that you can discuss?
We're trying to always expand. I think kind of in this growth phase that we're in, trying to expand into new markets. And so I think it's relatively well known. We have a pretty significant partnership with Akamai, kind of one of the biggest players in the CDN space. We work with a lot of their customers directly using the hydraulic technology to help them get basically observability and insights on their CDN products. And so that piece of the market is relatively well established, but now we're taking the technology that we built and looking at other places in the market. Are there security use cases? Are there other edge use cases outside of CDN that are interesting that we can develop? And so each of those, I think, it's not necessarily a new core platform or even new core features that are needed, but it's thinking about how do we identify the persona? How do we take what we've built and modify it in such a way that those use cases become reachable for our go-to-market teams? And so there's a lot of working with sales, working with marketing, working with our product teams to kind of help them understand the implications of what that expansion looks like. Obviously, everybody's asking about AI. Everybody wants to know what our AI strategy is, what everyone's AI strategy is. And so looking for ways that we can use some tools to do things like improve anomaly detection. There's always a desire for more proactive insights, alerts that don't require a human in the loop and don't require manual triggers to be set. So that's something we're always looking at ways to kind of help with data onboarding. One of the things we've seen over and over again as data volumes grow is so do the shapes of the data and the sources of the data. And we no longer live in a world where one person in an organization knows what all of the log types are that are going into any of these platforms. And so building tools that let end users kind of extract insights and extract kind of patterns and shapes from their data in a more automated way. And that's something that LLMs are really good at. So we've got a bunch of stuff that we're working on just to kind of make the platform more usable, faster time to value, all that stuff.
Cool. Now, tell us about your software engineering team, how many engineers you have, where they're located, your work model, if you're remote or hybrid or on-site.
Yeah, so we're a very remote company. We do have a few small offices. Our CEO, Marty Kagan, who you mentioned, is in Portland. So we've got a small office in Portland. But most of our employees are pretty globally distributed. And I think a lot of that came from, again, the relationship with Akamai was something that we've been building for a long time. And they're obviously a global company. And so wanting to have sales engineers, customer success engineers, go-to-market support in every region kind of meant that we built a global workforce. So we've kind of got people all over. A lot of our core engineering teams are based in US and Europe, but we definitely have folks all over. We've got a team in Ukraine that does a bunch of engineering work for us that have been fantastic. So yeah, pretty much all over. So we get pretty good at managing calendars and time zones.
How do you do that with a global engineering team?
Yeah, well, I mean, we try to make it so that there aren't a lot of calls where everybody has to be on. We have kind of like one main weekly, tech leaders sync that, everybody tries to be on. And so we try and do that early morning Pacific time. That obviously makes it pretty easy for Europe and East Coast to be on board. And so we try and be a little bit flexible with start times in the morning to make sure we can get everybody on board. Sometimes it means late night calls to catch up. We've got customer success and SRE teams in APJ. Their days start quite a bit later. For me, we don't do it every day, obviously, but when we need to, we try and be flexible with start and end times just to make sure that we can stay in touch with those folks. Yeah. But honestly, the biggest thing is you've got to be able to build a team where you don't need a lot of that. You shouldn't need to get people on a call to explain what needs to be done or to get work done. I think that's kind of a must-have in a distributed team. You got to trust your people, and you got to know that they're gonna do what you're expecting, without you having to babysit them. Like to put it bluntly, if you're babysitting your teams, the remote culture is a bad fit.
What are some things that have been slowing your engineering teams down? And what have you tried that's worked and not worked?
Yeah, I think the whole company now is a little over 200 people. We're probably 40% like core engineering. We probably have another 10 to 20% that are some form of like customer success engineers or site reliability engineering. So technical staff is probably between 50 and 60% of the company. I think one of the biggest things is just anytime you're going through hypergrowth, it takes a while for the org structure to catch up. You fill the roles that you need to fill and you get people working on stuff. And then it takes a while to kind of realize either where overlaps are and people are doing the same work on two different teams, or you're missing a coordination layer and work gets done and then it kind of stalls because nobody knows where it needs to go next. And so I think that's the place that we've been kind of working on, just building out some of those management layers, building out some of that organization. And I think honestly, we were a very engineering first company from our inception. It's a very technical problem that we're trying to solve. It's a very technical product. And so we got really far without a lot of traditional product leadership, product management. And I think we had a lot of folks who kind of did double duty as engineering and product. And I think that got us pretty far. But I think we're at the point now where we're seeing the need for more of that kind of traditional product structure. And so we're working on building that out. That's kind of one of our bigger 2026 goals, is kind of building more alignment between product and engineering. And I think going back to my past, I spent a lot of time at Pivotal Labs before it was acquired by EMC, which was for folks that know it, they were a big agile shop. And so we did pairing, test-driven development, but a big part of that whole model was you had this strong peer relationship between product and engineering. And I think that's something that I think highly successful teams, especially at scale, really need that kind of balance. And we could probably spend a whole episode on just product and engineering. But
let me ask a question on that. In the current structure, do you have product reporting up through you, or is that a separate leader?
No, yeah, product reports up through a separate leader. And I think that's actually good. I think it's healthy for those two teams to kind of have a separation in the organization. I do think that there's a give and take always with product and engineering. Like you can't just say, well, we're not product, we don't know what to build, we're not going to do anything until you give us PRD. Because then product is going to be like, well, we don't know what's possible, we don't know what the constraints are. So they can't really give an effective product strategy without some input from engineering. So I think it's always important for product leadership and engineering leadership to be talking all the time. So that's going to constantly be evolving. And I think if you don't have that give and take. If you feel like one is more important than the other, I think it makes it very difficult to balance and really serve the needs of the organization the best that you can.
A lot of times, my company, Sonatafy Technology, we're often brought in to troubleshoot what's going wrong in process. More times than not, you have engineering and product that some things have happened and they're not on the same page. There's a lot of friction. How do you make sure there's clear ownership and joint ownership between the teams?
Yeah, I think starting out with a set of really clear organizational goals is important. I think a lot of the times where I see breakdowns is it's, everybody wants to move fast, everybody wants to get things done quickly, but I think, if you're trying to solve a single issue really quickly without that broader context, I think it makes it very difficult for people to agree on what even is the goal that we're trying to achieve here. If it's something short term, are we just trying to ship something to get a deal closed? Like, okay, that might be the right decision, but maybe that means that we're actually going to slip on something that ties to a high level OKR that could be at jeopardy if we do that. And so I think having the context with those goals to be able to have that conversation is really important. And I think every company I've ever been at, there's been some tension there where I think that prioritization kind of gets muddy and you really have to sit down. I think it starts with leadership. Like you can't expect your individual engineers or individual product managers to be the ones that are kind of tasked with that trade-off.
Yeah. Leadership definitely has to take control on that.
Yeah. And I think it's one thing that Pivotal did really quite well is, those goals were always clear. Like we tried really hard at the leadership levels to make sure that those were clear. And then individual product managers, individual engineering, team leads, they could have those conversations within that context and understand week over week what was important. And I think, again, everybody's got different philosophies and methodologies, but I feel like one of the things I most enjoyed with Agile was that you can change any priority at any time. But if you're using a, like Pivotal Tracker or like a Kanban board, you're looking at like, okay, if I put this item here, this goes down the list. And you can see that trade-off. Whereas I feel like if you don't have, even if it's Jira or Trello or whatever, if you don't have that physical representation of the priorities, I think it makes it hard for people to feel the implications of that trade-off when they can't see the list change or the delivery. Pivotal Tracker had this thing where it would, estimate your velocity based on how much you had delivered over the previous few weeks. And you would see release markers based on dates. And, when you moved something, you would see that date change. And sometimes that alone, just seeing that estimated, like, oh, well, this is going to get pushed out to the next release, that would trigger a conversation where people would be like, well, okay, it's not actually more important than getting this other thing into a release. So let's push it down.
To that point, before the show, you were mentioning how you are moving to shorter release cycles to have a process change improvement. Talk about that.
Yes, I think, again, Agile philosophy, ship early, ship often. And I think especially in a situation where we are right now, where we got hundreds of end customers that are consuming our product through Akamai or through other partners, if we have long release cycles, it means that from the time that somebody finishes code, it's longer until a customer gets their hands on it. It's longer until we get feedback. And, testing is great and important, but there's no substitute for my code's in production and a customer is using it. And I think the longer that release cycle is, the more people tend to forget, like about the bug they patched or the feature they added and what it was supposed to do. And I think shorter release cycles really are good for obviously getting customer value as quickly as possible, but kind of helping engineers stay tightly coupled to that delivery mechanism and starting to get feedback on their work. I think it gives them a bigger sense of ownership and also gives them just the ability to reflect on, if there is a problem, what the cause was.
Well, and with how rapidly things are evolving, if you take too long to ship your releases, then they're outdated. So that definitely makes sense. Now, with your company being less than 10 years old, is tech debt a problem?
Yeah, I feel like tech debt's always a problem. Like even if you're a two-person startup, you're always accumulating some amount of technical debt. I think that the debt term is appropriate. I think people kind of forget that sometimes debt's a good thing. Sometimes you take on debt to achieve some other goal. And I think the problem is when you forget about it is when it comes back to bite you. And so I think it's always a trade-off. Again, it kind of comes back to the conversation between product and engineering. If you're a product leader, you've asked, or product manager, and you ask your engineering team to get something done quickly, and they can be transparent with you and say, like, well, we could do it this way and it's going to be faster, but it's going to incur debt, or we could do it this way that's slower and is how we would rather do it. Maybe it's worth it. Maybe there's a deal that gets closed, or maybe some other outcome. And so I think if you're doing it with transparency, I think tech debt can be healthy. Honestly, it's not one of our bigger issues. Like, I think we've been able to do a relatively good job of kind of compartmentalizing changes across teams, so that I think technical debt is not one of our bigger issues, but it's certainly there. It is for every engineering team.
What AI powered workflows are you using in engineering?
Yeah, so we've gotten licenses for everybody on the engineering team to have Claude Code. I'd say it's still early, and we have a lot of folks some folks use it more than others. We're dabbling with it a lot. We did some enablement sessions recently for engineering teams, for our SREs and CSEs, and I think it can be magical. But I think a lot of it is, I've been looking at some people's perspectives that are probably bolder than ours, where 100% Claude Code and they're shipping stuff without looking at it. And we certainly are not there.
It's hard to serve large enterprise clients that way.
Yeah. We do a lot of automated testing. Obviously, we still do a decent amount of manual release testing just because it's a complex distributed system. There are lots of things that I don't feel comfortable giving up the human in the loop in terms of the release cycle. But I think we're cautiously optimistic that I think it can help us solve some of our more, tedious challenges, like little bug fixes. We're using it for some of our user interface projects. Like, we've got some things that we're doing where I think it's tremendously helpful. I can get things done very quickly, but we're nowhere near like even 50% of our code being AI generated. If it's in the double digits, I'd be surprised, but it's something we're leaning into, and we're using it in our workflows, and it's been great. I think there's a lot of opportunity, but it's still early days.
Gotcha. So I think one of the hardest roles a CTO has to play is explaining technical issues to non-technical stakeholders, whether it's C-level execs or board members or private equity firms. How have you managed this throughout your career? What have you seen works good?
Yeah, I think trying to remember that whoever you're explaining it to is probably coming from a different background. So explaining through analogies, using specific data points. We had a meeting recently where we were talking about some issue around query performance. And I think kind of breaking it down into the fundamental issues, explain why something's happening, explain what the trade-offs are, kind of help them understand. Like, it may be a black box to them, but I think you can kind of help them understand the parameters. And so I think those complicated issues are never so complicated that you can't break it down. And so I think be patient, come up with good analogies and good clear explanations of the challenges. And I find that most of the times that will get people on the journey with you. And that usually solves it.
So throughout my career, I have had a lot of companies, and my book is called Fail Hard, Win Big. And it's my story of having 30 companies, 20 failures, and 10 successes. And good, bad, or indifferent, we learn more from failures than we do successes. Because when you have success, you're cocky, you're not paying as much attention to the little things that attributed to it. But when you fail, you have two choices. You could go cry in a corner and be depressed, or my rule is you can be upset for 24 hours, then you analyze what went wrong and minimize doing that again. So when you look at your tech career, what's a practical piece of advice you would want other tech leaders to know that you learned the hard way?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I was going to say, if you had 10 out of 30 successes, that's pretty good odds. Like, usually, yeah, 10% is kind of the benchmark.
It's kind of funny because I was like, do I really want to write a book that I've had 20 failures? And one of my buddies is a ex-Major League Baseball player. He's like, Taplin, you're batting .333. That's Hall of Fame. Like, get over it. And I don't know, that analogy helped me with that.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a great way to think about it. And I think that's sort of, when you consider venture capital as kind of like a I don't know. Just I think it's easy to externalize. Like they're looking for 1 out of 10 investments to be a home run to kind of be big enough to return the fund. What the other 9 do kind of doesn't matter. Like maybe they're good, maybe they're bad, but you're just looking for that 1 out of every 10. I think
they're using other people's money.
That's true.
But
That's
if
true.
Your own money, I think you're hoping for a little better odds.
Yeah, I think that's fair. But I think the same thing goes with startups in general. I think to your question, the thing that I think is the most interesting is that even in any given success, there are failures the whole way through. There hasn't been a single thing that I've worked on or company that I've built where it was just like, oh, we're gonna build this thing and be super successful, and that's it. Like you kind of need to realize that every company that's been out there and has made it, all the way through, whether it's an acquisition or an IPO, they had to kind of fight over and over and over, whether it's in the beginning finding product market fit, customer issues, employee issues. Like it's just nonstop challenges. And so I think figuring out how to overcome things that feel like failures, and I think you're right. Don't dwell on them. Give yourself 24 hours. Move on. Maybe you lost a huge deal that you thought was like, we got to do this to make the company successful. It happens all the time. And so I think that's been the most practical piece of guidance or advice for me is like, don't look at failures as a reason to give up. Like learn something from it, figure out how you're going to change it, and then move on. Maybe you fold the company and you start a new one. Well, what are you going to do differently the second time? Maybe it's you lost a huge deal. Well, why? What were you the wrong product? Were they the wrong customer? Like you can learn a lot on either side of that and figure out how to do better the second time.
It's kind of funny, but sometimes I'll tell people who, let's just say, aren't entrepreneurs about my book. And they're like, oh my gosh, you failed? And, you wrote about it? And they're working jobs that are okay, but not, where their dreams are. And I'll always put it in perspective that, do you want to advance in your career in what you're doing? You got to take risks. If you don't take risks, you're never going to keep going. And they'll be like, I can't believe you failed so many times. And you can use it as fuel or you can use it to take you down. But sounds like we're in agreement there.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And I think whether it's, appetite for risk or just kind of how people think about stuff, like there are thousands of jobs. If you just want somebody to tell you what to do and you do it, and you're good at that, that's great. But there's almost always opportunity if you want to go try stuff and fail and figure things out, like there's endless opportunities for people to do that.
I always tell people your income and your net worth is directly tied to your ability to solve more challenges than everyone else. So if you don't want challenges, you want to be in a corner, you could probably still make a decent income, but you're not going to, get to huge heights unless you're somebody who can take those risks and solve more challenges.
Yeah. And I will say, I don't want to discount those people who don't want to do that. I mean, like most companies are full of people who want stability and consistency. And like, we wouldn't be able to hire software engineers if every single one of them was just like trying to go off and start the next company. So I think it's valuable. But yeah, you're right. I think there's the risk reward ratio exists, for a reason.
Todd, well, thank you so much for getting uncensored with us today. You really have a unique background. You've made your mark in the observability space. You've had an exit to a huge company, ServiceNow. What you guys are doing at Hydrolix is huge. You're definitely somebody that others need to learn from. Before we wrap, what's your no BS advice for tech leaders out there trying to build, scale, or even just survive in these crazy times?
First of all, thanks for having me. It's been a great conversation. And I think we touched on it a little bit, but I think you build organizations of people you trust. If you can't trust your people, we talked a little bit about this with remote work, but if you can't trust your people, you're not gonna succeed. I think you got to be able to do that. So, be transparent, be honest, trust your people, and just don't give up.
I love it. Thanks again, Todd. That's it for this episode of Software Leaders Uncensored. I'm Steve Taplin. If you enjoyed the show, go ahead and hit subscribe. Remember to fail hard, win big, and always build what matters. See you next time.
That's a wrap.
Another great episode of Software Leaders Uncensored. Thank you guys so much for listening. I really appreciate it. It's a lot of fun doing this show. I love talking with great tech leaders. As a side note, if you're interested, check out my new book, Fail Hard, Win Big. This is the story of how I built 30 companies, failed on 20, and turned 10 into multi-million-dollar wins. The common thread with all of them was custom software. Also, if you need software development help out there, my company, Sonatafy Technology, we deliver world-class software development engineers out of Latin America. We have a solid track record of helping companies launch better products and faster. Thanks again for listening. Appreciate it and appreciate you.